Welcome everyone to this week's video. Today we are on Fish Friday number 248 and we have a good one for you today. I do apologize, this is a day late, but I had a miserable week at work and unfortunately just could not get a video out, but I hope this very interesting fish makes it up for you. Today's fish that we're going to be talking about is bam! The smalltooth sawfish. Now, the smalltooth sawfish, or scientific name, Pristis pectinata. Again, that's Pristis pectinata. It is part of the family Pristidae, which is the family of sawfish or carpenter sharks. Super interesting family of sharks. Not many species. As you can hear, I also have the no longer baby, but the princess with me. So you are probably going to hear her as she is watching her shows. But the smalltooth sawfish is found in the tropical and subtropical portions of the Atlantic Ocean, and it's usually found in coastal marine or estuarine waters. And they're usually found in waters less than 8 meters or 26 feet in depth. So this is a very, very shallow water shark. Very, very shallow, and they primarily live in areas with soft bottoms, which is mud, sand, and usually those areas have mangroves or seagrass beds, things like that. Now they will sometime go over rocks or coral reefs, and they'll even go deeper, not too much deeper. But I believe you might as well say 98% of the time you're going to find them over sand or mud, very close to the shorelines. Now, it is a large fish. The largest confirmed size is 5.54 meters, which is 18.2 feet. And they weigh up to about 350 kilograms, which is 770 pounds. Now, I say largest confirmed size because there are anecdotal evidence of some getting up to 25 feet, which is, I believe, around 8-ish meters, but probably not. Not saying it can't, but probably not. And you also have to think that this fish, a lot of its length actually comes from its rostrum, which we'll talk about that in a second. Now in terms of coloration, pretty bland, lighter gray, darkish gray, black on their dorsal side, so their back, with very white, light green on their underside, so their ventral side. So in terms of coloration, there's not much to it. One kind of interesting thing to me is usually a lot of fish shade, so they'll go from dark to lighter dark to darker white to white down the side. This fish, it's dark and then white, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's a very flat fish. Even though they're pretty cylindrical in body shape, the underside of a sawfish, as many of you are probably aware of, is almost perfectly flat, and that's because the mouth is actually on the underside. And as I said, they do have a rostrum, which is this nose piece. Yeah, that's right, a nose. The rostrum, it's pretty narrow with 20 to 32 teeth in it. And they'll use them for both sensing and capturing of prey. A lot of people originally thought, oh, it's only for like capturing prey. And some people thought it was like, well, maybe it's just sensing and it's just kind of like a defense mechanism. Well, it's actually used for both, which is actually a very interesting dynamic. To my knowledge, there's a lot of fish species out there that have sort of nostril appendages, and they're usually either for sensing prey or they're using for capturing prey. They almost never do both. Well, the sawfish actually does, and they also use it for defense. They'll use it to ward off other predators, other sawfish. They'll give them relatively quick whacks. It's amazing how fast they can actually swing their saw. Now, I did say teeth. It is important to note that these are not actually teeth. They are just a type of scale called dermal denticles. And I don't want to get too much into dermal denticles, but I really want you to, my audience, to go out and look at them, because they're actually a lot more common than people might think. But these are not actually teeth. The teeth are in the mouth. So, just please go look into those. Now, they can be distinguished from other sawfish by their fins. The dorsal fin is above the leading edge of the pelvic fins. They have relatively short pectoral fins. And apparently there is a very lack of a lower lobe on the caudal fin. So other sawfish are going to have much more of a distinctive lobe. And I'm guessing their dorsal fin is set a little farther back on their behind their pelvic fins. So other than that, I don't have much experience with these, so I can't just say, look at one and, oh, that's this, that's that. That's something that I just don't have much experience with. But apparently that is the easiest way to tell them apart, aside from where they're found. I want to make that very clear, aside from where they're found. Because these fish are actually very critically endangered. They have an extremely small range. And even historically, it had the smallest range of all sawfish species, of which there's only like 5 or so. Historically, it covered around 2.1 million square kilometers, which is a little over 800,000 miles. That's an extremely small range for a large fish that's ocean dwelling. And it's disappeared from much of that range, and realistically, it's restricted to the shorelines of the Gulf of Mexico and on the Atlantic coast of Florida. There are, I believe, some populations still on the African coastline, but I believe it's primarily in the Gulf of Mexico. And it's very restricted to coastal regions. So it's a very sad deal. And you might be thinking, well, why are they critically endangered? Is it for their food source? Well, they primarily eat fish and they consume invertebrates, and they do it exceptionally well. This rostrum, the rostrum at here has thousands upon thousands of electroreceptors that help them detect prey. So no, they are very good at finding prey. The reason why these are going down, becoming critically endangered, is actually unfortunately because of what is called bycatch. So commercial fishing operations would historically would get sawfish tangled up in their nets, and instead of releasing them, they would kill them, because sawfish would get tangled up in the nets, cause a lot of damage to the nets, and the fishermen did not want to release them so that they would get caught up in the nets again. So unfortunately, that's why their population declined, because they are very long-lived, and it does take them a while to sexually mature. But speaking of their reproduction, which is the interesting fact that we're going to video on, long ago we did one on the giant sawtooth shark, and the interesting fact was about the rostrum, which has its own interesting, and I do encourage everyone, please go investigate rostrums of sawfish. They're very, very cool. But something that I don't want to say always puzzled me growing up, but something that I thought, that I would think on and off as I was growing up and getting into fisheries and stuff like that. So think of around 15 or so, I had a question. I was like, how do sawfish reproduce? How do their babies come out? And it's actually a very interesting thing, because it's like, do they grow this rostrum, or are they born with it? And a lot of people might think, oh, they're born with it, or they're eggs, so maybe they're born with it, but it's smaller. And what's actually happening is they are ovoviviparous, meaning they are giving birth to live pups. But they give birth to pups that are around 2 feet long, which is around 7 to 14 pups. So in terms of like reproduction, they're fairly, I'm actually was fairly surprised at those numbers, because 7 to 14 pups is quite a lot of pups for a long-lived species. But their saw, their rostrum, it's actually fully developed at birth, meaning it has almost all the denticles. It's in existence, but it's very flexible, and that's how it's. That's one of the reasons why mothers don't get injured when they're giving birth to their pups. It's actually very flexible and hasn't hardened. So what I likened it to is like, think of like I don't know, like clay. It's when you first get clay and wet it, it's very soft and flexible. Then as it dries out or it goes into a kiln, it becomes extremely durable. And that's how this is I believe that it's just soft cartilage, and it's just wobbling around, and then all of a sudden, as relatively quickly after birth, it straightens out and hardens and becomes the weapon that is used. But what's more than that, even with it being flexible, it still has those dermal denticles, the teeth. And how does that not harm the mother? Well, it actually has a sheath of very thick gelatinous mucus that dissolves very quickly. This is to also help protect the mothers from the teeth. And that to me was such an interesting thing. And it takes me to the Jurassic Park famous quote, "Life finds a way." And this is a prime example of that. This animal has evolved. It needs this defensive mechanism. It also is why they are successful in being, relatively predatory animals and keeping themselves safe. So it's such an important part of their life. But, the longer you don't have something like that, the more dangerous it is to be young. And so it's such a unique evolutionary adaptation that not only is the rostrum softer and flexible to protect the mother, but just somehow the body was like, let's put a really thick mucus coat over this. That means that the teeth don't even have an opportunity to harm the mother. Just a really, really interesting adaptation. Thank you guys so much again. I really appreciate it. Hope to see you again. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe. If you do, I'd really appreciate it. Hope to see you again. If you'd like to support the channel, please click the link down below. It is by no means expected, but very much appreciated. Sorry for the day late video. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your loved ones. Shout out to Andy Merch, who supplies all these wonderful pictures for Sharks and Rays. Once again, take care of yourselves. Take care of your loved ones. And